And that's why y'all gotta sub to the channel, man. Because the Miami Heat have officially signed Dru Smith to a 3-year deal, something that I told y'all was gonna happen just earlier today, where in my video, I said this: need a big man. So what do I think they end up doing now that they have a little bit of money and a roster spot that they need to fill? Well, I do think that the Heat ultimately end up signing Dru Smith. Yeah, that's right. Dru Smith, not Kai Jones. I also said in that video that I had no idea why the Dolphins were favored to beat the Lions, and the Dolphins did actually end up winning. So shout out to Quinn Ewers, shout out to Ollie Gordon. I really think the Fins have something there with him. But back to the Miami Heat, there was all this talk and hype surrounding Kai Jones, rightfully so. I think he would have been an exciting player here. I think he would be a perfect fit. You know, we discussed his pending offer from an Italian team. So a lot of Heat fans thought that's why the Heat were so urgent to get under the tax, is so they could get Kai Jones, a guy they just worked out earlier in the week. But I did end up saying that the Heat would ultimately sign Dru Smith. And less than 7 hours later, that's exactly what happened. And none of us really should be surprised, because we know that the entire Heat front office and Eric Spoelstra, they are obsessed with Dru Smith. As my guy David Ramil from the Locked On Heat podcast put on Twitter, he said, find yourself someone who loves you as much as the Heat front office loves Dru Smith, which really should be the goal in life. Not money, not fame, but find someone who loves you like the Heat love Dru Smith. Because now Dru Smith is back on what, like his 19th stint with the franchise, which is one more than Michael Beasley's stint, and still about 17 away from the amount of times Briante Weber was here. But seriously, I did look into Dru Smith's past with Miami, because I feel like they cut and waived him and re-signed him so many times. It started back in 2021, where he was on the Summer League team. They ended up signing him to an offer, and then they waived him prior to the start of the season. They then signed him to multiple two-way contracts in 2022 and waived him both times. Then he signed with the Brooklyn Nets, and as a Heat fan, I remember thinking, thank God we finally got rid of Dru Smith. But then it was just a year later where the Heat signed him to a two-way contract in 2023 and then ended up converting his contract to a standard deal. And then that's when he unfortunately tore his ACL in Cleveland. If you remember, because of that janky Cleveland court where there's like a foot drop off between the courts and the bench. It's a dumb court in Cleveland. It ended up getting Dru Smith hurt. But then the next year, of course, he came back, which was last season. The Heat signed him to a two-way contract. He was playing pretty well, and then he unfortunately tore his Achilles, and then the Heat ended up waiving him then. But now he's back on a 3-year, partially guaranteed contract, and I'm happy. You know, like most Heat fans, I didn't love the Dru Smith experience at first for multiple years. He had the goofy-looking hair, didn't really do anything in particular that kind of stood out at you. I thought he was basically a net nothing out there, which I guess is fine. You know, from a backup point guard spot, if you get a guy who just doesn't mess things up, it's okay, I guess. But it just wasn't a great experience. He wasn't really all that good a shooter, and I just didn't really see what the hell the Heat valued in him so much. But as of last year, and although he only played 14 games, that was enough for me to publicly denounce my Dru Smith haterism and be a fully converted Dru Smith believer, because, yeah, again, it was only 14 games, but he really made an impact in those games, and I kind of fell in love with him. He was very clearly a Heat culture guy, because every time he checked into the game, like, he immediately made a play that positively impacted the game. Whether it was getting a steal on Devin Booker, hitting a couple of threes in the corner, he was always making winning plays out there. And for the first time, I finally saw why the Miami Heat valued him so much. So I get why the Heat like him, but I don't necessarily understand why they brought him back right now. I don't think it makes a lot of sense from multiple aspects. I mean, you just re-signed DaVon Mitchell to a two-year contract, and I'm not even sure if Davion's going to start as of right now. I actually think he might. Most Heat fans think that Norman Powell is going to start. I'm not so sure about that, but if Norman does eventually start, it'll be next to Tyler Hero. You'll probably have Davion come off the bench in that regard. unless the Heat start like Powell at the 2 and put Wiggins at the 4, Bam at the 5, have Ware come off the bench since they don't have a backup center still. But for right now, I'm kind of assuming they'll have the same starting lineup as last year. But let's just say they end up starting Norman Powell, put Davion on the bench. And now what? You're going to play Davion and Dru Smith off the bench somehow? I don't really get how that would work just because they're very similar type of players, which would be kind of scary for other teams on the defensive end. Just having those two kinds of dogs on the perimeter really lock you down. I think it would be fun to watch, but obviously offensively it would be a bit of a mess. And depending who else was out there, the Heat might not have a ton of size. So even outside of the fit standpoint, you have a lot of injury concerns. You're talking back-to-back seasons that he had season-ending injuries. And it's not like Dru Smith is a guy that's super young anyways. People may think he's, a sophomore or junior because he doesn't have that much experience in the NBA. But he came into the league relatively older anyways. He's already 27 years old. So, you're not talking about a guy that might have had a few injuries early in his career and spends the rest of his career healthy. Like, no, he's 27. And as you get older, you typically don't recover from injuries as quickly. I don't want to act like 27 is super old or anything like that, but my point is he's not a rookie. And outside of all that stuff, you got to worry how real last year was considering the small sample size because, yeah, he'll always be a good defender if he's still able to move, as well laterally and things like that. But he did shoot 52% from 3 last year on like 2 attempts a night. It was something ridiculous like that. It was over 50%. Obviously, he's not going to continue to shoot over 50% over a sustained season, but can he shoot 40%? Can he shoot high 30%? I don't know, because that would be a bit of an outlier compared to what he did his first couple of seasons in the NBA. Obviously, there's not a lot of sample size there either, but you still don't have a large film tape of him being a very productive on-court NBA player. So there's a lot of questions there. And then plus, look at your guard depth. I mean, you didn't really need him in terms of position, right? Because if you count the guards, you got Hero, you got Kasparis, you got Pella, you got Davion, you got Norman Powell, and Terry Rozier's still on the roster somehow. That's 6 guards. I still think you need a true point guard, a true facilitator. Dru Smith is certainly not that, although I think he's capable. Like we said earlier, he's basically able to go out there and not mess anything up, which is a good sign for a backup point guard, but he's not a true facilitator. So the Heat still don't have one of those. And I guess they're maybe looking for Kasparis to one day be their potential playmaker. But now you got to wonder how much of Kasparis' minutes is going to be taken up by Dru Smith. I don't know. It's just something to think about. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to play Dru Smith over Kasparis because it's not like Kas was a bad defender anyways. I mean, coming, into the draft, people didn't think he could be a great defender. But in Summer League, he really impressed me. He's also a guy that was an absolute dog on the defensive end, diving for loose balls, picking people's pockets. I think he can be a very capable defender in the NBA. And then, of course, you also have the upside of his playmaking and scoring and ability to get to the rim. So I certainly don't hope that Dru Smith is a progress stopper for Kasparis Giacochonis. I understand, I guess in terms of fit, the Heat did need some more point of attack / perimeter defense to supplement the loss of Haywood Highsmith. But preferably, they could have got some of that from someone who plays the wing position, a bigger player, a player who could guard I was going to say Jason Tatum's, but he's out next season. But we know Haywood Highsmith was the Tatum stopper. There's not going to be Dru Smith, or Dru Smith is not going to guard Jaylen Brown like Haywood Highsmith could have. Maybe you have Bam Adebayo guard a lot of those wings now, especially if he's playing next to Khalil Ware. So Khalil Ware can guard the big men. You can have Bam Adebayo on the perimeter a little bit more, which I do like the idea of that. And then you could have some more guard defense like Dru Smith, DaVon Mitchell to kind of help supplement everything like that, especially if the Heat are going to pay Tyler Hero. They're going to need to play him in the backcourt next to someone that can play defense. So I do kind of get the whole Dru Smith perspective there. But still not having a backup center is insane to me because your only big man off the bench right now is Nikola Jovic, who's not even a big man. And if the Heat try to play him like one, then that's an absolute disservice to his career because we've seen time and time again him thrive with the ball in his hands. So let him be a guard off the bench, which again, I guess you can even put him as another guard now too. So he needs size badly. I mean, Jovic just dropped like 22 points in his game versus Germany, I think it was. He had the ball in his hands. He was hitting threes. It should be that way. He shouldn't have to play backup big out of necessity because the Heat didn't sign anyone else. So I do wish that maybe the Heat could have got Kai Jones or somebody like that, but I'm not going to be mad at the Dru Smith signing because I do like Dru, and at the end of the day, he's an impactful Heat culture type player, and I've been saying for years now that the Heat need more Heat culture type guys so they can get back to that identity of toughness. Now, it's not even a bad contract. It's officially a $7.9 million deal over the course of 3 seasons, which comes to about $2.6 million per year. And only that first season is fully guaranteed, which is next year. So if going into the 2026 offseason, there's a whale who becomes available and the Heat need the extra money, and if they need to shed $3 million from Dru Smith's salary, they can waive him. And it basically is not a long-term hindrance on your salary cap books. So that $2.6 million that Dru Smith is going to be getting this season, it's basically a minimum contract, which, as we discussed in today's earlier video, that's why the Heat can't get Kai Jones too, because after the Hayward Highsmith trade, they were $4 million under the luxury tax, which was the goal. And now you're adding in $2.6 million of Dru Smith's contract, which means that they're now only $1.4 million under the luxury tax. So if you wanted to sign Kai Jones to a minimum, it would also be a little more than $2 million, which of course means the Heat would be right back over the luxury tax, which is what they're trying to avoid this season. So I don't think the Heat would get Kai Jones right now. They'll probably keep that last roster spot open, take it into the season, and then they can sign a guy after January where his prorated contract is now less than $2 million, and the Heat can sign a guy without going over the luxury tax. Will Kai Jones be available by then? Who knows? He'll probably sign that deal in Italy now. We'll see what happens. I guess the Heat could make another move to get more cap space. They could still waive and stretch Fontecchio. Who knows? You still got a month and a half left before training camp. And I actually did read that there's some optimism that Dru Smith might actually be ready by then, which is kind of stunning to me. As Barry Jackson wrote in his article, there's optimism that Smith, who sustained the non-contact injury in late December, just last year, will be able to play either by the start of the regular season on October 22nd in Orlando or very soon after. So if he can get back to playing in games less than a year later, then that's just a credit to his hard work, which it shouldn't surprise me that he's a hardworking guy because the Miami Heat love him. So I do hope he can play again soon. And overall, I'm not going to get too crazy about it because I think he's a good guy and a good player when healthy. That's all I got to say for this video, though. I want to remind y'all once again to fill out my Family Feud questionnaire down in the comments below because I'm going to have some of your favorite Heat content creators battle it out. I think I have about 55 responses so far, which is very good. And if you want to get in on that, make sure to click that link down below. I also want to shout out FanDuel once more, the sponsor of today's video, and then let y'all know to comment your thoughts down below because I'm very curious to hear what y'all think. Like the video and subscribe. All that good stuff is greatly appreciated, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.